Hi, everybody. I'm Suzanne Shanahan at the Keenan Institute for Ethics here at Duke, and I'm delighted to welcome you to Reimagining the World Together, How Friendship Matters for Our Future. We're here in week 3 of the series that brings together friends and colleagues, often highly unlikely duos, to share insights about their relationships and how it has shaped their lives, their work, and their commitments. The series is part of the Purpose Project here at Duke that makes character, purpose, and explorations of one's life's work a signature feature of the Duke experience. The Purpose Project is co-sponsored by Duke Divinity, the Office of Undergraduate Education, and the Keenan Institute for Ethics. Thus far, we've heard from 2 duos. The first was Reverend Barber and Jonathan Wilson Hargrove, about how their shared commitments to social justice and ethical change in the United States has created a bond and a friendship that is really supportive, but also restorative. And last week, we heard from executive coach Marshall Goldsmith and Jim Yong Kim, the former head of the World Bank, who bonded over a mutual interest in each other's work, Buddhism, and musicals. So yes, there was singing, and yes, there was even crying. But for me, I think one of the most important things that came out of that conversation was a sense of how friends support each other, even when they doubted themselves, how the friendship provides a way forward in the darkest of times. And I think this is really one of the things that's an essential element of the friendship series that we're working with. In these conversations, what we get is a really intimate window into the hard work and the joy of a cherished relationship. But they also give us a sense of how these friendships create, nurture, and drive action and change in the world. Goldsmith is author of the wildly popular book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. This seems an especially apt metaphor for the moment, whether we're talking about climate change, anti-racism, or COVID-19. We need a new way forward because here ain't working for anyone anymore. For this project, friendship then is the key ingredient and that path forward. It is the way out, and in friendship lies the transformative possibility we are all searching for. So in keeping with this sentiment, this week we are presenting another dynamic duo, partners in crime, or in this case, partners in health, Paul Farmer and Todd McCormack, in a conversation moderated by Wendy O'Meara. Wendy is an infectious disease professor here at Duke Medical School, but has been based in Kenya for the past 14 years, working on malarial prevention and treatment. Paul Farmer is the renowned physician and medical anthropologist who's committed his life to providing healthcare to the world's poorest communities. He is co-founder and chief strategist of Partners in Health. Todd McCormack is a founding board member of Partners in Health and is currently senior vice president at IMG Media, the largest producer and distributor of sports programming in the world. Together, they have built hospitals and transformed medical systems in Haiti, Peru, Rwanda, and more. Todd and Paul met here at Duke. In a recent piece, I heard they bonded over both being dumped by their girlfriends on the very same day, but also by their commitment to social justice. They come in some sense from opposite sides of the track, Todd being raised more in affluence, Paul more in poverty. Nonetheless, their faith, their commitment to human dignity made them fast friends. They understand and trust one another. They have complementary skills. They have a common purpose. These are the elements of their secret sauce. And this is what we're going to hear more about in the conversation with Wendy today. Just a brief note about technology. So as all Zoom adventures go, there are often technical problems. At the Institute, we have a staff hiding behind the scenes, ready to jump in should anything go awry. So stay calm, they've got it covered. Also, please note, if you have questions, submit them via the Q&A. And they'll be passed on directly to Wendy to share at about 6:05 when we open it up for discussion. And with that, I want to extend a very warm welcome to Wendy, Paul, and Todd, and I'll duck off from here. Have fun.
Great, thanks so much, Suzanne. And thanks everyone for joining this third installment of Reimagining Our World Together. As Suzanne mentioned last week, it was very intense with William and Jim. There were tears and there was a musical interlude, and it was very compelling. It was a tough act to follow, but we'll try to keep everyone interested. These days we hear a lot about big data and machine learning and artificial intelligence and how these solutions built with big data are going to transform our future. And as an engineer, I definitely believe this is true. But when David asked if I would moderate this session, I saw this series as an antidote to the big data movement. And I wanted to participate in this opportunity to shine a light on this single dyad and think very deeply about what we can learn from just one data point. So for the next hour, we're going to sort of leave the church of big data and reflect on the life-changing power of individual friendships. So maybe I could just ask Paul and Todd to talk a little bit about the early part of their friendship, how sort of their friendship was solidified in their time at Duke they met.
Todd first.
Oh, I'm not used to going first here. I don't know, I think it still exists, Wanamaker 1 on the West Campus at Duke. Sad to make me think it's empty or you all are in some apartment somewhere, Zooming somewhere from home. I think Duke students are back, which is good. But I'll never forget, actually, our freshman resident advisor gathered the whole dorm in one of the West Campus classrooms. And of course, none of us knew anybody other than our roommate as we were walking over to this event on our first day at Duke. And very prophetic. I mean, he said, you don't know anybody right now. He says, but, literally, I can promise you that in this room, and this is just going back to big data for a minute, but the stats were saying that, 80% of the people in this room, are going to, develop lifelong friendships. 60% are going to be in each other's wedding right now. You don't even know who. So it kind of opened up your mind to a huge opportunity of thinking about the future. And we all came from high schools, great friendships. In our cases, girlfriends back home who were missing. My daughter taught me a generation later about the turkey drop at Thanksgiving, which I never heard that phrase in terms of when you end up ending your relationship with your high school sweetheart. But anyway, long story short, Paul was in that audience. I really met Paul a couple days later, and it is true. I think we first truly bonded when we both were dumped at our Wanamaker formal. Hopefully, you guys will have a formal, and we'll have a consoling shoulder to commiserate with. But that's kind of the kind of meeting story from my perspective. I think I was a bit. As I say, we definitely were cut from very different cuts of cloth. And I think that for me, when I kind of came, I think my life of privilege and the worlds I had been circling in, I was really looking for, a way to access and to understand some of the other dynamics that I saw alive and well in the world. And Paul certainly, provided an amazing conduit for that for me.
How can I contradict?
What did you say, Paul? Did you get it right?
Yeah, I can't contradict any of that. I do remember, however, one scene, and so it was the drop-off, Todd's drop-off by his parents in the back of Wanamaker. I had gone on Project Wild, which is an outward bound type experience, and Todd would later get into that scene as well. And so, I had my parents met me after that, but I remember Todd had such an easy way about him, and it's such a, what I then thought was, great confidence. Of course, you get to know people really well, and Todd has a great modesty and about him. But I just saw this very confident person, and I think I really did literally ask him, "Are those all your shirts? And why are they wrapped in plastic?" And is that fair, Todd?
Fair statement.
And but during that first year, Todd, rapidly became my close friend, and we spent a lot of time together. And so the whole 4 years at Duke were punctuated wherever we were, whatever place we lived in, whatever our activities were. We always we maintained our friendship. That sounds like a crass word, but we kept it alive, and in the summers as well. Mm-hmm. And so it was never any question for me that Todd was going to be a big part of my life. And indeed I was in his wedding, and indeed his children were baptized in Haiti, et cetera, et cetera. So
how did you keep that connection over the summers, pre-email,
there are things called letters with stamps on them that you put in.
Which is embarrassing to me. I hope you don't share my letters with other people, Todd. That would be a reach. But yeah, and we visited each other, Todd actually, after our freshman year, did Outward Bound, came and stayed with me a couple of days. One Thanksgiving I was at their home in Cleveland. We visited each other, and we did write letters. Sounds so old school.
And it's funny, since we are the divinity schools associated with this, I think I was getting very interested in religion at the time at Duke, and Paul was decidedly pissed off at the Catholic Church. So it was kind of a nice confluence of a gut check for each of us at the time too, which was an early part of our friendship building.
And that was, we would have meals, and we would talk about and not argue with any vehemence, but that's a good, I'll never forget some of those discussions about, what the meaning of faith is and how it's related to the fight for social justice, dignity for all, and for the belief that no one person should matter more than another. These were really the kind of things we did talk about as undergraduates. And I treasure those discussions to this day.
Do you still share those discussions?
All the time. In fact, Todd's wife, Anne, more than my family, I would say, but sometimes she'll say, "All right, guys, we're done with this discussion." It's usually about partners in health, or, funding, or a budget crisis in Haiti, or a new hospital in Rwanda, or, the ways in which development should occur, meaning the development of finding resources. So we still talk about these matters all the time. Usually more than other people would. Sorry.
It's funny. No, I just thought, and I don't know for you, Paul, but I feel that Partners in Health was a manifestation of, a desire to figure out how to make things better. So anyway, to me, that's kind of an important point, because I feel like in some ways, if you look at, when I think of friendships today, or see friends, from the trivial, from friends on Facebook or Instagram, or people you share experiences with. And I think, the Venn diagram from, my kind of country club sport activity to, Paul's life of, running the herpetology club at his high school, there was not a lot of huge intersection in what we did, but I feel like we really, had a desire to kind of think about some of the bigger issues that were kind of going on. And I think we all have our ideals, if you will, when we are young, and what we want to try to do. Mm-hmm. And I think if you can find someone that helps you keep your ideals alive, it doesn't matter if it's through a nonprofit, it doesn't matter if it's through late night conversations and walks, but we can't give up on those ideals and those hopes. And I think for me, that trumps any kind of experience we could possibly have. If he was a good golfer, or I knew more about, tropical plants, that would make him happy, and we might have more chances to interact about something that was a common bond. But I think that is, to me, the essence of what's important to me about my relationship with Paul.
It sounds like similar to, especially to the first pair of speakers that we heard in the series, that your friendship is really rooted in a shared purpose. And I wonder if you can sort of share with us a story that, an anecdote or a moment that you remember that embodies that sort of shared purpose, or how you identified that common ground in each other at, the age of 18 or 19. How did that look when you identified that, that shared, that common sort of passion for social justice? And
What do you think, Bubba?
Well, I was going back to the conversation that you already mentioned in passing. Of course, we had all kinds of different friends, and the overlap was not, massive, and our Venn diagrams overlapped around really big issues, and we were both riven by those, and chastened by calculus, I might add. As the years went by and we weren't living in the same dorm, on the occasions we were together, which was not infrequently, we would pick up where we left off. And those, Todd just said it beautifully. I mean, those kind of friendships must often or even always be related to, some of these big issues. So we were talking about, I remember a conversation with Todd, even before that, about some of those listening will remember the Greensboro Five, the killing of, 5 anti-racist protesters at a anti-Ku Klux Klan rally. This was, in our sophomore year. And, I remember with one group of my friends, who I knew through the Chronicle, actually, through writing for the newspaper, were saying, having a discussion about what that meant. A number of the people killed, by the way, were affiliated with Duke, and going to Todd and just saying, well, what do you think about this? What should we do? How are we related to this? And I don't even remember the resolution of the discussion. I just remember thinking that Todd was, someone with whom I would have that discussion, and many more times after that. Of course, we also have stories from our work launching Partners in Health. And since Jim Kim was the last guest, I met Todd in 1978 on the first day of school, but I met Jim Kim, Ophelia Dahl, and my Haitian colleagues. I met them all in 1983. So in those months, those intense months, I met Jim because I was interviewing at Harvard Medical School, but Ophelia Dahl and my Haitian colleagues I'd met in Haiti, and I was writing Todd about what I was seeing, and he was answering the letters. So again, sounds like a repetition, and of course our lives together took us all over the world, especially Haiti, Rwanda, but those constitutive discussions in college, I think, were really the bedrock of the discussions we would have throughout the rest of our lives.
And it sounds kind of crazy, but I also feel that you mentioned Paul as kind of the chief strategist, and certainly it was the leading vision behind all the stuff that PIH did. And I think even Ophelia and Jim would say Paul was their teacher in terms of doing that. And I think we're all benefiting from that. And I guess what I'm trying to say is I feel like friendship. I think there are many areas in which I have, as my wife will remind me, I don't lack in self-confidence. But I do think, anyone that's fortunate to find a Paul Farmer in their lives, or people that have a clarity of how to construct more structural, fair, just systems within our society, you'd be stupid not wanting to be their friend. And I think for so many of us, it's like, if Paul's asked once, he's been asked a million times now, it's so great, but what should I do, right? And I think trying to articulate, and create avenues or create ways that you can kind of impact the change you want to see is a huge challenge. And I think that, I'm very comfortable with so many things I've done to help PIH. But it's to me, helping Paul and Ophelia and Jim has been what greater honor could anyone have? And to, do it with a friend and to have someone that you've enjoyed being with, along the way is, great. So I really, I don't know. Paul's my kind of celebrity. I guess what I'm saying is a lot of us want to kind of go have these great experiences with different people. And I feel like we shouldn't be shy away from that. But I do think that he is, in a way, without making me feel defensive, has always been able to try to, bring me in and bring me along. And I think friends accompany each other. They don't just have experiences with each other, to use a verb that, Paul taught me. So I think that that's a different criteria of friendship. Who are the people that can open up your eyes to a different set of challenges in the world? And it's not just who can you go have a blast with, even though we often have a blast doing what we did, but that was almost like, anyway, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I like that friends accompany each other. I think, we heard some of these same themes in the previous conversations. And I keep coming back to this idea that friendships make your world bigger. They help you see things in a way that that you couldn't on your own, or they give you access to a point of view or an experience or a way of thinking about something that that you wouldn't arrive at on your own. Last week Marshall talked about how his friendship with Jim allowed him to feel part of Jim's accomplishments and the good that he was doing in the world. And Marshall's friendship helped Jim to act boldly and to see himself differently, to see himself through different eyes. Do you feel like your friendship has made the world, how has it made the world bigger for you? How has it expanded, the way you see things or the way you tackle things?
Well, just for the record, Jim's never lacked boldness. Paul, you want to start with that one?
Well, I mean, there's also the idea of friendship as refuge, as protection, as retreat, and I'm thinking, I don't know why, I'm thinking, I just suddenly thought of a monastery, but I mean, or a retreat center or something. And I just, because our daily lives are often so different, I have often relied on Todd not to shrink my world, right? Because he is the same. As I said, our conversations at Duke were really about the big things, and they have been ever since. But, I from the time I was at Duke, particularly in the year after I graduated before medical school, Haiti expanded my world. It was Haiti. Haiti was my great teacher and remains my teacher. Opened my eyes to a lot of things I wouldn't have understood, never understood. And I'm lucky I got to share those things with Todd and Ophelia, who I met there, and Jim and others. But I do want to say that there's so much, it's just irreplaceable for me to have a friend who's just got my back, who's just, if I come back from a very grueling month in Rwanda, or which, most of them are not grueling, and just, want to watch Stephen Colbert with Todd, that's fine too, and so I have a great debt for Todd's protectiveness, his kindness, his embrace, and his wife and children as well. So I know that's not what you asked, but sometimes we need our world expanded in more, intimate ways. And particularly for me, that's been in Boston, where when I was younger, I used to have some alienation going from Haiti to Harvard. As the years went by, it would often become more bracing, than debilitating. You know, as I learned to master, you know, that feeling of, feeling that many Americans have right now, as the depths of structural racism are revealed to them, which have been revealed to plenty of people all the time. But, you know, to have someone to talk to about that in a, as the term is now, a safe way, that's been just precious to me. And I hope you hear me, Todd.
Yeah. And for me, boy, you know, I think that expansive issue, I get those, but I also feel like you should not only be able to contract, but I do think, you know, all from Jim and Ophelia straight on down to the board, to so many people at PIH, to the LaFontaine's who first invited Paul into this village in Haiti to begin our work. We know 4 generations of their family now. And, you know, I don't think there's one time, you know, when you're saying like, hey, you're seeing too much of someone else, or you know, I mean, there's never been any kind of pettiness about it. And for me, one of the great bellwethers of the health of a friendship is that person expanding a circle of friends and people around a common shared experience, a shared cause, a shared program. And I you know, I also just can't stress enough, especially, you know, in this world of diversity and inclusion and equity, that's becoming more transparent to more people today. But I feel like, you know, it's funny, my daughter once said to me, you know, I realized I had too many friends with the same area code on their cell phone numbers as me. I mean, there are too many people from, you know, the Darien and Greenwich, Connecticut area. I need to, you know, and how do you meet new friends and new people? And how do you do that in a way that's safe? And I think that, you know, so while I can provide that maybe a world to contract for Paul, you know, I think it's been a dynamic where he's continually expanded the way I think about the world, and also the people I've been able to meet in the world as well.
Yeah. What, you know, I was going to come back to this at the end, but maybe we can talk about it a little bit now, you know, with thinking about how important the, coming together, like you said, 80% of the people in this room will make lifelong friends here at Duke, and 60% are going to be in each other's weddings, and that you visited each other, and that was an important part of keeping your friendship, sustaining your friendship in between semesters. And now thinking about, you know, at Duke, for example, we have only the freshmen and sophomores, and next semester it's going to be only the juniors and seniors, and many campuses are not coming back in person at all. How, you know, it makes me feel like there's so much missed opportunity for those friendships, because people coming to a university are leaving behind friendships. They're open to new connections. They're open to new ideas. You're at a time in your life that's so formative for deciding what's important and what your core values are. And now it's sort of been so disrupted by this pandemic that the ability to come together in the same way that we used to, and even to communicate with someone like this all the time, right? It's changed our lives, and it certainly is going to change university for students who are enrolled now. What do you think about that, or how can we overcome that?
Well, I mean, just to speak to those students, those who, the undergrads or the graduate students too, but I'm going to echo Todd and say I would encourage you to realize that, you know, your time is more limited to seize those friendships and make something of them. And, you know, there are a million ways to do that now that didn't exist, you know, back in 1978 to 82. So we know it can be done. Here we are on Zoom, you know, as if we were in each other's living room. And so just as a teacher, as a professor, you know, the same for medical students I teach, I would say, seize the moment. These, you know, and I remember very well Philip Leach, his comments on that day, and they stuck with me as well. So I would certainly do that. I do feel I feel a kind of oppression right now, a separation from Haiti. I had it about Rwanda until I went, just went back there. All the places that I'm used to being, it's been very, very hard. That part of it has been hard. But again, this work and Partners in Health particularly is really built on friendships. I mean, the people we work with in Haiti in 1983, we still work with them unless they're no longer with us. And some of the people who aren't with us died, of old age. These are our strongest friendships, I think. In Rwanda, Navajo Nation, Russia, it's similar. So, I guess that's my worry is that there's only so much you can do to make new friends. Fortunately, we have a lot of great friends, and I wouldn't, just say what Todd said. You gotta take it seriously.
Yeah, I also feel like, when I think about my freshman or early days at Duke, the amount of time I kind of invested in, going to the fraternity rush party, trying to get together people to go to a game, wanting to be liked by this crowd. There's a huge amount of time I wasted as I try to address my own insecurities and become part of groups. And so it just seems to me, you don't have that time now, but you do have time to, I don't know, I have great faith in the ingenuity of this next generation, I guess. And I think be able to, making an effort to, once a day to go on a walk with somebody or to do something, or, it's a little bit like exercise and doing things that are good for you. I think you have to figure out a way to schedule that in your day. And I would imagine, that within restrictions and guidelines at Duke, you could figure ways to meet people.
And if you're not as a freshman or a sophomore, if you're not talking about some of the things that we talked about, and I'd never been to Haiti, until after Duke, and I hadn't worked in inner city Boston, but we were talking about those things, and now it seems to me that if you do a sort of examen de conscience or whatever you call it, looking inward as a student at the, especially at a place like Duke, this amazing, beautiful bubble in the middle of a giant forest, if you're not in there talking about some of these issues that are facing our nation and our world, I'm not saying get new friends. I'm saying work harder to do that, because we're also counting on the ingenuity and resolve of the next generation to do a better job than we did, at pushing forward, a just world where we're not trashing the planet and trashing each other. I mean, sorry if I sounded like Reverend Barber there for a second, but
Okay. You don't have to apologize for channeling Reverend Barber.
Oh my God, he has a beautiful way of saying that.
Yeah.
I would just say it doesn't have to come from me or Todd, but those are messages, signs that we just all need to engage more in addressing our social pathologies.
Right. And I also feel like, I've worked in the private sector, in business my whole life. I have, and I think it's almost more of, all of us are not going to take career paths like Paul Farmer, and more people are going to take career paths like me. And I think it's more urgent for people that, have had access to privilege, are going to be able to get good internships, to get good jobs, to figure out how to be connected to these issues. I think friendship's an amazing way. Because, for me, that's what worries me about, when small bubbles at Duke, because they can, as opposed to crossing bubbles and meeting people that are different than you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that at this moment, we have to be so intentional and proactive about finding those connections, because, all of the conversations that you would hope would arise spontaneously after sharing this discussion with us amongst the 190 people who are on this call, those aren't going to happen those aren't going to happen in a very spontaneous, organic way, because everyone's sitting in their own home digesting this, you know. And I think it's forming those friendships and making sure that we have those conversations with each other. It just has to be a lot more intentional and purposeful, and, you know, and for the faculty and parents to help young people figure out how to make those connections and diversify the conversations.
Yeah.
So on a lighter note, I'd like to hear more about whether Todd's mom was seriously hurt when she fell off the back of the golf cart that you were driving.
Well, I actually have photographic evidence on this, and rarely do I correct Paul on the facts, but actually my mom was driving the golf cart and Paul was on the back and he fell off.
All right.
It's only
I must have knocked my head.
Exactly.
I had a concussion, clearly.
So
Thank God it was
Your home sounds fun, Todd.
I don't want to have an alternative set of facts here, as we call them sometimes. Some of our
now
leaders.
I remember, I was looking at flashcards. I was studying for medical school and wasn't paying attention at all. I couldn't be less interested in golf, no offense. And
Right.
and yes, that's right.
No. So, but there is living evidence. He's still okay. I also, he blames me for breaking his leg in front of a bus as well, which is another false story, which I'll preempt him on. But he was leaving my apartment in Cambridge one day, and he turned around and said, "Todd, you're not paying attention to me." And I said, "Paul, look out for the bus."
Boom.
And PIH almost died an early death. Let me tell you, it came screeching to a halt. Paul's leg was kind of, it wasn't protruding to the skin, but almost. It was definitely not. I was not a doctor, but I knew something was wrong with his leg. And I have to confess, I was thinking, okay, finally we can sue the person that hit Paul and make a lot of money for PIH as a fundraising idea. We had about 3 donors at this time.
In the street, he said that.
And
you sure he didn't push you a little bit?
well, this guy who hit Paul was walking out of his car, coming to him, and I've got my whole plan, is cooking up in my subconscious. And Paul says, "I'm so sorry I hit your car." And I go, "Paul, that's not the line I need."
You pulled the rug right out from under you.
Exactly.
I said it was entirely my fault, and it was. But I'll tell you, as an index of affection, later, like an hour later, I'm in an emergency room at one of the Harvard teaching hospitals. And so they put up the x-ray. Let's just say it didn't look good. And Todd fainted. So he cares about me.
Todd fainted from the x-ray, but not from the
x-ray.
actual...
Just having them talk about Paul's illness, I don't, there's a great irony that I'm involved with a medical charity and it's doing medical work around the world, because I faint when I see blood. I do not like talking about this stuff. So
that's funny.
That's pretty funny.
To bring up the heavy stuff again, though, I was just thinking about the example of Reverend Barber showing up straight from a demonstration in Charlotte. There are lots of ways to get involved in thinking about these pressing matters right now. And they didn't seem, you can look back in the name of this series based on that really nice poster we saw at the beginning is, in times of crisis and after crisis. And I think if you're working with people who are living in poverty and marginalized by racism or gender inequality or the history of their zip code or lack thereof, you get reminders a lot that for people facing these forces, their crises are often ongoing, chronic, smoldering crises, And now we have, a wake-up signal. Now we're living in a pandemic, and after the murder of George Floyd, it's, no one is unaffected by what that means as a social pathology, what that event means. So are there ways in terms of your challenge, Wendy, for people who are either behind a mask or separated by, through no fault of their own, they're not going to have the same kind of college experience as we did. Is there a way to engage it? Obviously it has to be meaningful to you, but these are like very meaningful struggles. And, I just would say if Reverend Barber and his friend from youth can do it, then, a lot of other people can as well. Sorry, am I preaching?
No, I think it's very relevant. And I think, it was very clear through the conversation with Reverend Barber and Jonathan Wilson Hargrove that each of them really appreciated that their friendship gave them a window into a culture and a point of view and just a whole community that they wouldn't have had access to outside of that friendship. And that was so important for them, and that the sort of defining moment for Jonathan of the initiation of their friendship was when he really, for the first time, saw his own community and his way of thinking about things from Reverend Barber's eyes, or from his point of view. And I think listening to the two of you talk, I think one thing that resonates with me is that, Paul, you feel like Todd could really understand how your experiences in Haiti changed you. It's so hard to talk to just anybody about how, your experiences in Haiti or your experiences in Rwanda or, my own experiences in Kenya. You become disconnected from the people that you even grew up with by those experiences because they can't understand how they've changed you. And so to have a friend who can really understand how those experiences changed you and be there with you in that is a very powerful friendship.
That was the alienation that I was speaking about, as you know, from your own experience, to go, and I'm not talking about, you don't need to leave a nation state like ours to have them.
True. Yep.
In a way, my preparation for Haiti was an interest in migrant farm workers in North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And, but that anguish and anger, frankly, and, and horror and sadness and joy as well, of course, it can be very alienating, and Todd, in spite of his, privileged upbringing, and his family, I might add, his mother is a friend of mine, in spite of what she did to me on the golf cart.
I was gonna say.
All Todd's family. But to know someone who has that kind of power of empathy, mm-hmm. Which is sometimes just saying, okay, just sit down and watch, TV, chill, or tell me what you saw. And, we have been focusing on the positive experiences because they're the, preponderant ones. But, I have seen a lot of very bad things, and so has Todd, that I wish I could unsee, or, I wish they had not come to pass, in, Alabama, Haiti, you name it. These are more direct experiences. And for those that Todd has not shared, he's always wanted to hear more or just be a great sounding board. And like I said, a refuge.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. There's something else I was going to ask and it's just escaped my mind. Yeah, so I think in a few minutes, we're going to move to question and answer, which I'm sure will be great. Oh, we're already getting some questions. So the first question is, can you talk a bit about what inspired you to found Partners in Health and how you became involved? So Paul, how you were inspired to found it and how Todd became involved. I'm not sure if that's really accurate. It sounds like it was really born out of your your friendship rather than
But
you
I
can.
think there is still a way to answer it, and I'd like to hear Todd's perspective. But the origin story for Haiti, for me, for Partners in Health, is really that year, 1983, and Haiti. And I don't think Jim or Ophelia or Todd would say otherwise. That was the impetus. But we also knew that it wasn't about Haiti, that it was, we knew a lot about the pathologies, in the United States too, and elsewhere. But I saw something very terrible, a young woman die in childbirth. And, I remember, how sad, how terrible it was, and then I got to say, even though I've seen that many times since, I've never seen it at the Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston where I work. These are exceedingly, rare events. And the United States has a bad record on maternal mortality, but I'm just saying I have seen it many times, but never, in the Boston hospital. And I just remember, again, not feeling anger, but feeling, grief and, how could this have happened? And anyway, I started writing a letter to Todd, and then I even harangued his mother, who I hardly knew back then, and father, to donate money, and Aunt Barbara, to donate money for a blood bank at this, in this place. And believe me, anybody who thinks of themselves as a white Christian savior, a white savior of any sort in Haiti, is going to be disabused very quickly by their hosts, or at least that was my experience. Knowing that you're not going to alienate your friend by introducing something that is radically different from his experience, as it was mine, is also something that I think we can cultivate as a species, right? Like the young people you're talking about, my students and yours, the ones whose lives have been upended by COVID, they can cultivate that, just as all of us are called to do when facing radically different experiences. I didn't mean to slow down the pace there.
No, I like that. I like that when you struggled with that, with that horrible thing that you saw, that you wanted to communicate about that with Todd. That's the first thing you wanted to do, is you wanted to talk to him about that.
And I mentioned that as the story for Partners in Health, because that effort, which did lead to a blood bank, I don't regard that as successful at all. And it was the lack of success, really, meaning, is there a way to make sure that this sick fee-for-service neoliberal model of paying for healthcare doesn't kill more young women and their infants? And that's why we started Partners in Health. Because seeing that what we saw in Haiti, and it wasn't just me, just didn't work for people living in poverty. And that was true even in mission groups. I don't know what your experience in Kenya has been like, but that was a shocker for me. I assumed that if you're a missionary and running any kind of social services, that it wasn't just fee for service, but it was. And so that as much as anything, in response to the generous question, was how it started.
One thing I'd add, though, Paul, which I think is important, is I think people should resist everything in their power to start another NGO if they can. I mean, so two things about that. We actually had a vehicle, the Tom White, who was the fifth co-founder, who was the only one that was over 23 and actually had some money, which was helpful. Yeah. We actually set up something early on. The La Fontaine family invited Paul to Haiti. So one, be invited to the people that you are proximate to and want to be proximate to and help. Don't just impose yourself, number one. So for 2 years, we had a separate trust set up with Tom to get money to Haiti, but we decided we really wanted to, what they needed was more resources. We had more resources, and we had friends that had more resources, so we needed to let them have the tax advantages of donating. I mean, I hate the sound, but there wasn't like this master vision, like, oh, 20 nights at Duke, and now we're going to think of this great nonprofit, and we're going to change the world, blah, blah, blah. Nothing like that. I mean, it was much more as a mechanism through which to try to address something. And you know, after the earthquake in Haiti, there were, Paul did some work at the UN and his office there, working with President Clinton, counted NGOs working in Haiti, and there are 10,000 of them. And it's still fucked up. I mean, it's crazy, right? And so you have this you know, situation where $6 billion of aid is being given to Haiti. 1% of that money actually gets to the Haitian government, but we all like to think the Haitian government's more corrupt than ours. I mean, you know, so these are the things that get, you know, the systems that you're trying to actually change. You know, we need to change the thinking inside the Beltway where 60% of foreign aid stays, right? If Trump wanted to drain a swamp, he should have started there. You know, so these are the learnings, you know, when you hang around with Paul Farmer, you start kind of getting to know. And I think the people that are, you know, have some influence and have the resources have to not only better allocate them, but more intelligently do that and create a vehicle only when you have no other vehicle to do.
Mm-hmm.
And just to add to that, and again, this is not from the 80s. These are lessons that we learned the hard way. You know, one of the things that we always try to do as Partners in Health, which is large, you know, there are 19,000 employees, almost all of them from the countries that they serve in now. You know, like there are 6,000 in Haiti, and I don't really think there's not even 1% who aren't Haitians. So this is a, you know, aggressive job creation scheme as well. But all of our work in recent years, with a few notable exceptions, have been within the public sector institutions.
Mm-hmm.
I guess El Dorette, you know, there's a public hospital there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you know,
this is definitely there's definitely a moment where you say, okay, setting up a parallel system because the public system is broken is not maybe not the right way to go. But there was a lot of that happening around the world. I have a question here from someone who has been working as a Partners in Health contact doing contact tracing for Partners in Health. And she asks, or he maybe, how do you help each other stay in check with your mental, physical well-being with such demanding jobs and jobs where you're committing so much of your time to others? Is there an aspect of your relationship that helps you maintain your sort of work-life balance or your mental health?
We look out for each other, you know, at least Todd is incredibly generous looking out for me. I think, you know, the stories I told you about that feeling of alienation in between Harvard and Haiti, those are mental health challenges, right? They're well-being challenges. They're, you know, tranquility challenges. So the kind of things that we're describing are really the answers to that question. You know, we look out for each other, you know, our families too, you know, and have hobbies.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, Paul's an expert gardener. You know, I'm one of the few people that doesn't want a letter of recommendation written to, you know, for some graduate student in global health, but want to see pictures of his koi if you want to improve his mental health.
Or feign interest in them.
Okay. All right, I have another question from a senior in high school here in Carborough. And he asks, his name is Noah, and he asks, how can faith ensure solidarity with marginalized communities and or people in poverty and not charity? I think he's contrasting solidarity and charity.
Hey there, Noah. Thank you for the question. I think we know that professions of faith do not ensure solidarity. I mean, I'm sure Reverend Barber had occasion to talk about that. Certainly, you know, his predecessors in the civil rights struggle, you know, marveled again and again at, you know, the lack of solidarity within, you know, many churches, not just in the South, you know, and the struggle for civil rights, suffrage, inclusion, and equity. So there's nothing about the word itself that suggests to me that it's linked automatically to solidarity. And I think one of the answers, Noah, that I would give is, we got to think about the material challenges people are facing. If you look at this whole discussion of essential workers in the United States and who's getting exposed to COVID and why not only risk of infection is so different from group to group, but also risk of dying once infected, these are not manifestations of cultural differences, or they're really have a lot to do with material circumstances. Like, do you have a job where there's unemployment insurance? Do you live in a country where there's unemployment insurance? Is there is a way to shelter in place when you're living in a crowded tenement or in a jail or in a meatpacking plant? So, I would say that, and this was a discussion that Todd and I had a lot as students, and one of my alienation with the Catholic Church, this is probably TMI, was really addressed most effectively when I got to see progressive Catholics in Haiti who were willing to go the last mile to fight for social justice for poor people. So that was, again, an instructive thing for me to see. Todd, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the only thing it's funny, we had a kind of post-George Floyd discussion as kind of an all-staff thing at PIH, and I was on this call, and there was someone who said kind of a great line. He said, we don't need allies, ones in solidarity, we need accomplices. And I might even argue that charity, you can be a better accomplice sometimes through charity than in solidarity. And so I don't think people should feel guilty about it. We got to change things, and to change things, you need money to do that. And I think for people trying to have an avenue to find people that have novel ways of fixing old problems and hold them accountable to trying to do it, I think is a great thing. And you might be a better accomplice than someone just standing in as an ally. Anyway, Paul, it was one of those great lines to people. It's like, oh my gosh, I wish I could be you, but I only am good at, banking or management consulting or, God forbid, sports media. They're like, no, do your job. We need partners, all kind of partners in this work. So I don't think you have to feel, having said that, I think I've said Paul's an amazing way for me to become proximate and develop friendships to new people in these settings about issues I cared about. But I don't think you have to feel guilty if you don't have that. And I think it's okay to be charitable.
So I got one more question from a teacher at the same high school. And she or he says that they worked with many students who joined a protest for the first time in their lives as a result of the Black Lives Matter movement.
It's Scarborough High School?
Scarborough High.
Been there.
This teacher shared that most of these students want to take sustained action on racism and are grappling with what steps they should take in addition to protesting. So do you have any advice for these students who are teetering on the brink of action and not sure how to go forward?
Well, first of all, having been to Scarborough and meeting with a number of classes there, and even have them come to talks I've given at Duke, I can assure you that inside that high school, there are teachers and students who are deeply involved in this work already. Number two, I think one of the things that Todd and I are saying, and not just because of the format of this evening, is that you really need to work with your friends in these things, getting together and say, what can we do beyond protests? Not as a way of stopping the conversation, like, well, what can we do beyond protests? But really the way it was expressed by the teacher, what else can we do? And, Noah mentioned solidarity. And as Todd said, we shouldn't dump on charity. It's one of the cardinal virtues. But pragmatic solidarity, just think about the work that's being done on posting bail, right? Or on the activism around specific challenges, from redlining to the carceral system, the prison system. These call out for broad community engagement. And then third thing is when I was in high school in rural Florida, there is no way that I knew any of these things that were already true in not only in our country, but in that county. And so I would say, this is kind of typical professor thing to say, but I would say study. You know, you've got to learn more. You've got to be more fluent than we were when we were 18. We had the fun for it, but these are all things we had to learn, sometimes through the school of hard knocks, but often through reading these things later, graduate school, medical school. We still read together now. But I think those are three things that you could contemplate. Todd, you're a teacher.
Yeah, I think those are all good challenges, and I think I echo what Brian Stevenson always says too. The challenge is how to become proximate and closer to what you want to be involved with, and that could be a friendship like it was with me with Paul. But I think trying to go to something new or other events outside your school, doing that with friends, these are all do add pragmatic into solid area is a good idea.
Yeah, I like that. Friendship is an excellent way to get closer to the things that you want to be involved in or that you want to help affect change. We have another interesting question here. This one might be a little bit more challenging. Do disagreements you have in your professional relationship ever impact your personal relationship, and how do you work together to overcome that? We haven't talked at all about disagreements.
I think one great thing about friendships, if a good two tests of this, and be able to say things that people don't want to hear. So I disagree with a lot. Paul and I argue all the time. Paul has a problem that he loves everybody. I love people that are efficient and raise more money for Partners in Health.
Your love is conditional, is what you're saying.
Exactly. I feel like there's, whether it's his, poor taste in raw meats to hiring and firing decisions in a big organization. We can disagree about a whole host of things, and we love giving each other a hard time about our differences.
So you can fall back on sort of some humor and some
yeah. And just the sheer 42 years is, as the Haitians say, 42 years. It's not 2 years. By the time we were really arguing about these very difficult, and Todd nails it. The things we disagree about are very similar to what he just said. By the time we started arguing, we already had 10 years of unblemished friendship, because, we met in 1978, we started Partners in Health in 1987. We were still in our 20s. So I think that even our arguments, which can be very tough personally, and Todd's usually right, I must say.
Not true, but that's all right.
But no, I didn't say that harshly. We have also that to fall back on, the fact that, hey, we disagree. Yeah, we have spats, but they're always about pretty big things. And, we have decades of friendship to fall back on.
Another question asks a little bit different, has a little bit different angle. This is directed to you, Todd. Could you say a little bit more about some of the concrete ways that your friendship with Dr. Farmer has shaped the way you navigate the world of sports media and private business more generally?
I'm pretty good at compartmentalizing things. I don't, generally not a person that likes to go to my friends and try to preach or say, a charity I'm involved with is better than a charity you're involved with. So I've, I would say there are a few times there have been kind of intersections and points, but so I try to sometimes invite that conversation. But I find, many people in business, they're focused on business, should be paid to focus on business and increasing value of shareholders and what they're trying to do. And so I don't try to judge that too much. I have to say it's, I sometimes wish there was maybe sometimes more crossovers in what we're doing. We certainly have done some fun, fundraising events, trying to link, sports experience. I had the privilege of getting asked, not so much anymore because I'm really much more kind of an advisory role. I really haven't run the media business at IMG in a decade now, but I'm still involved in the company, but much more as kind of a senior advisor, and then I am kind of a member of the leadership team. But 10 years ago, I'd be asking thousands of requests for tickets, informations, all that kind of stuff. So I'd find fun ways to try to say, well, if you'd like to do this, how can you help out Partners in Health? But I think it's been great as Paul, from whether he's looking for an agent for his new book, which is about to come out this fall, to trying to get some advice on new film releases and some of the stories, or negotiating film contracts for PIH. There are little things I've done kind of behind the scenes where it's kind of helped out those skill sets. But in general, they've been compartmentalized in two different worlds.
Okay.
Hey, getting an IMG agent as an academic nerd, and a book on Ebola and West Africa. Todd said, you got to have an agent. I'm like, come on, I don't need an agent. Let me tell you, the IMG guy got me just the publishing house I wanted. It's not that compartmentalized.
Yeah, and there's some amazing things going on now, in sports. I have to say, I got to give a shout out to another Dookie, Adam Silver, one of the most amazing human beings on the planet. And I think how he's, tried to deal with some of the equity and racial justice issues in our country proactively. Think about from when Colin Kaepernick first took a knee to where the NBA is now. It's breathtaking how quickly that changed. When you think about issues of apartheid in South Africa and how, sports was, instrumental in that, a little bit through rugby and some of the changes. So I think sports plays a role in some of these things. And so I've been kind of proud about that, but I've not been as proactive about doing it in my day-to-day life as someone like Adam has.
Okay, we have another question. I'm gonna just read this one verbatim. I am very moved by your story and the work of Partners in Health in countries like Rwanda. I'm curious, however, being two rather affluent white men running organizations working in impoverished communities internationally, how do you manage to keep the organization's work that of a true friend or partner and not a removed foreign aid type of institution?
You want me to start on that, Todd?
Sure.
I think, first of all, that is exactly the kind of question we want. Because the way you said it is not rhetorical, it's how do you do it? And, I'll just give a couple of examples. For example, if the intention is, and this is, for some reason, we kind of worked this out in our 20s. I mean, our mission statement is pretty good, and we rewrote it in 1987. And among the charges that, are laid out there, but, offering medical care and social services to people who would not otherwise have them, build local capacity to do so, engage in training and building local capacity. That's one reason we ended up starting a university in Rwanda, and then learn from it. So just to go from that grand vision to how do you be partners? Well, for example, in Rwanda and in Peru and Russia, as Todd said, you get invited in, right? And if you're trying to build Rwandan institutions and open up possibilities for young Rwandans or not so young Rwandans to be engaged in health and social justice work, then you work with the local authorities, you have Rwandan employees, you favor education as well as direct clinical services, maybe you'd even build a university. I think these are all responses to our anxiety and correct anxiety about our own place of privilege in the world and how we can still nonetheless contribute to a radical progressive vision of, equity and pragmatic solidarity. And we've been writing about this over the years as well, like how do you put together an NGO that doesn't weaken local capacity?
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to argue, for example, that Partners in Health in Rwanda is weakening local capacity. There's 5,000 people, they're all Rwandan who work for it. The director's Rwandan, they run Rwandan public hospitals. These are structural interventions
Mm-hmm.
to address that very problem. And there are plenty more, and I'd be glad to share information with any student or anyone who wants to more information about some of the practice. It's also on the Partners in Health website, a lot of this stuff. I think it still is. Is that right, Todd?
Yeah, and to me, the problem is not the local communities we're trying to help. The problem is with people like us, right? And I think so we intentionally, or I should say Paul intentionally, and I said, that sounds like a good idea, I think, said that we're going to set up local organizations. The organization in Haiti, Zami La Santé, existed 2 years before we actually formed Partners in Health. We only created Partners in Health because we wanted to get U.S. tax deductions for people who gave us money, because if we didn't, and there was another charity someone wanted to support, they wouldn't favor us over that. So it's really that simple. And so I think that the change in the way we approach these problems has to come from privileged, in our case, white males, but believe me, privilege comes in a multitude of colors and genders. So, I think that we have to be more intentional about how we try to do that. And I think, things are, without question, everyone said working with the public sector is harder if you talk to our people on our team. And it's like, it's easier just to take pot shots at our government rather than try to fix it. Right? But so to me, if you're supporting a charter school, it's not trying to fix the broader public school system. You don't want to build workarounds. And this is the problem with 10,000 NGOs in Haiti. They're all workarounds to the government, and the government's getting no funding. And anyway, so I don't know if that, I'm not trying to dodge the question, but I feel like this is how we structurally looked at these problems, I think is really important with people with power and influence to set these things up.
Yeah, I really like how you said that earlier, Paul, that it's important to be invited, right? And I think there's a humility and putting the other person's priorities first that comes with this idea of being invited.
And Wendy, just to pick up on that, I remember back in maybe the 90s, as I was finishing my medical training and joining the faculty at Harvard Medical School, in the hospitals, including my own, the one I still work for, there was this attempt to advance something called cultural competence. And it was a huge mistake, because what we really needed was cultural humility for the reasons that Todd laid out as well. It's like these are structural interventions, right? Like, hey, build local jobs, right? Work at the public sector, reinforce Rwandan institutions, et cetera, et cetera. But that attitudinal or affective, stance, cultural humility, is so much more valuable than cultural competence, or the illusion of cultural competence.
Yeah,
Look,
exactly.
PhD in anthropology. I speak fluent Haitian. I've been there forever, right? This doesn't mean I would go around saying, "Oh, I'm culturally competent in Haiti."
Yeah.
And that's the only place where it would be even close, right? I lived 10 years in Rwanda, and I'm not even like a cultural toddler. I know how to care people, I know how to build hospitals with others, but cultural competence is nowhere near as important as cultural humility.
Okay, I think we need to end right there, because I really like that final reflection of cultural humility. And so Erin is telling me that it's time to wrap up. So I just want to thank you both so much for taking the time to really have a very just a very real conversation about your friendship. And I'd like to invite everyone who's listening to join us next Thursday for the next Reimagining the World Together conversation between Brian Hare and Vanessa Woods. So thanks very much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thank you, Toddy.
See you soon, buddy.
It was great to talk to you both. Bye.
Bye, Wendy. Thank you.
Thank you so much.